Welcome to Capes, Cowls and Masks, the show where we uncover the world of soups and science fiction. I'm your host, Tom Gapper. I'm a podcaster, aspiring writer, dashing rogue, and your beloved comic book shogun. And as always, I'm joined by my fellow co-host,
David Oscar. I am a editor over on freshtakehub.com and a podcaster as well. And apparently just myself, according to Tom on Twitter. I'm not sexy like Jake when he was celebrating.
I mean, if you got a pair of glasses, that might,
Okay.
Have you considered that?
So do a kind of like community, just put on the framed glasses, see what difference that makes, or
even his shadow.
Doctor Who kind of just put on some some sunglasses, see what that makes.
Or maybe it's like Clark Kent, and you put the glasses on, and I have no idea who you are.
It could just as easily work that way.
It's like who the fuck are you? But anyway, this is our weekly news show, breaking down and discussing the biggest stories that have hit the stands this week. And of course, at the end, we'll have our poll list. Before we get into that, Dave, what have you been up to? Have you been anything exciting going on in your life that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I think we did discuss it before. Last week we were talking about that was actually my last recorded podcast in my old house, and now I've moved officially into my new flat. Which is crazy. So it's been, a very busy time. Moving a lot of things, a lot of driving back and forth, heaving things upstairs. Of course, my priority was the first move-in day was to bring in all my Blu-rays, my comics, my books, my statues, all my like nerdy stuff had to come in first. And then all the like boring stuff like, a bed and a sofa and all of that kind of stuff. So
that stuff.
Yeah. So at the moment, I've got more of a makeshift setup, which is probably the most makeshift setup I've had for a very long time, because I haven't yet finished my sort of office studio room. So it'd be very nice when that's all set up. But thankfully, this is audio, so we can't view. People at home can't see that anyway. But
and we take full advantage of that.
Yeah.
We never wear pants, people. Never.
But yeah, it is kind of crazy how we've all been moving and had a lot on at the same time. The fact that, Jake is not joining us this week also because of moving and painting. And yeah, I saw his house the other day because Jake helped me with moving my television, which was a very precious sort of part of the move as well. I was like, I need somebody I can trust here. Jake is the person to go to. He knows how important it is that your television is so safely moved and secured once you got it into the flat. So he helped me move that and some of the unit and everything like that. So and seeing his house, what a crazy house he lives in. It's quite a crazy setup he's got there. And I don't envy him having to paint all of that house either. So good luck, Jake.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Obviously, very sad that he's not here this week, which is totally because he's moving and not at all because I came on too strong. But yeah, I've also been moving. I'm back living in Swansea now. I'm currently crashing on a friend's couch where my roommate is a rabbit. That's right. I live with a rabbit called Nancy. She's beautiful. I got my new flat getting sorted on Friday, so there's going to be more moving about. So it's been a bit chaotic, I think, for all of us. And amidst all this chaos, sadly, I'd say just not a huge amount of news this week. Still some exciting stuff, but it's been pretty a sparse one. So this will be a weird episode to have without Jake here, but we'll carry on. We'll persevere.
Sometimes these slower news weeks are sometimes more refreshing, and sometimes the better chance for us to kind of discuss the more nerdy niche stuff. Because often when it is like, huge Marvel trailer or something like that, obviously everyone's talking about it. But I think it's good for listeners as well. If you want to know the news, this is the chance. Because obviously a lot of people will be listening like, oh yeah, I know about that Spider-Man trailer. Yeah, this is your chance to find out the actual news.
Well, I guess without any further ado, let's get started.
Tear up page 1, run that photo instead.
Headline?
Spider-Man, hero or menace? Exclusive Daily Bugle photo.
So, first of all, Netflix has released the first trailer for Season 2 of Lock and Key, and even revealed its release date just in time for Halloween. So the show is based on the graphic novel of the same name. It's by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. Seems to be moving away from the events of the source material and carving its own exciting path, and one that is more dangerous and full of magic compared to the first season. So it'll premiere with a 10-episode season, which is typical for Netflix. It'll be their second season, and it'll premiere on October 22nd. So the trailer, I think, sort of names itself as more of a teaser trailer, so I'm assuming we might get one more then. We'll get one more before the release of Lock and Key. But yeah, I think when this was released, it was, I wouldn't say a huge, big deal, but it did make a sort of impact. It had a lot of the trades or covering it, talking about it, what to expect in season 2, the end of the season. Quite a few people talking about it. I believe it was trending, but it didn't become one of Netflix's biggest shows. But it definitely, I think, has the potential. Personally, I was always interested in it. I thought it looked quite interesting, but I did feel that there was that potential that it was, is this going to be kind of like, young adult, kiddie, kind of teenagery program, which kind of looks dark and serious, kind of like what you expect with things like Riverdale, or is it going to be like, oh no, this is actually something that adults can enjoy, and teenagers and young adults alike, and that is taken with more of a serious attitude, so something like, Hunger Games or the Harry Potter films, in which those can still be enjoyed by all ages. So that was sort of my concerns with it, and why maybe I didn't jump straight away to watch it. But there's a lot of stuff that I saw, and the lore and the fantasy elements that I liked, and that's why I like from this season 2 announcement is that it seems to be going darker and having more magic, which is a lot of the stuff that sort of attracted me to it and sounds quite interesting. But again, I never had any experience with this comic series, and yet to have watched season 1, but maybe this will inspire me to do so. Tom, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I've not watched the show myself as of yet. I think I'm going to, though, off the basis of what I really liked about this teaser trailer was the fact that, I've started looking into the comics, reading them a bit more because they always were on my radar, and it has been really interesting. So I'm kind of just like, okay, maybe I will watch the show. So a little, tiny bit annoyed to this, they're carving their own path. It seems now, just as I'm getting into this, but whatever. But yeah, the trailer, what I liked about it was that I watched it, and even though I hadn't seen season 1, I was watching it going, okay, I have no idea what storylines they did in season 1. There's nothing here that screams to me that would have been a cool thing to know about. So yeah, I think I will check out the show, especially in time for season 2. Maybe we can even review it on the show when it comes out. Watch this space, maybe. But it definitely attracts my attention. It looks like my brand of weird, the show, especially this new season. Just everything in that teaser trailer was teasing me. It was almost like it was just going, Tom, you have to watch this show. You have to watch it right now. And I'm just like, okay, all right, I'll do it. So you know what? I might actually start watching it after this podcast.
Yeah, I suppose
that's what I might do.
It's the idea of when you've got a fantasy concept and it's like, there's all these different keys and they open different doors to different worlds. It's a typical kind of way of luring you into a fantasy project when they've got a good concept like that. And that's what a lot of sci-fi fantasy fans enjoy about this kind of genre, is that you can kind of go, oh yeah, that sounds like a cool idea, or can't wait to explore those worlds or these keys. So I think that it seems like a strong enough premise that it could carve itself out to something quite original, quite unique. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that a lot of the stuff here looks weird and kind of embraces that fantasy element with lots of sort of cool visuals, etc. I like as well that we seem to, it's embracing the kind of villainy of some of the characters, and you see these cool crowns and everything like that. So yeah, I suppose the only thing, like I said, is still concerning me is maybe that sort of more young adult vibe, or the fact, is it going to be something just like a wannabe Sabrina or Riverdale, that kind of stuff. There's also a bit of dodgy effects where some guy is sort of flying over the trees and everything as a ghost, which I was a bit not sure about this. But yeah, but I think I will try it out. I think also I'm a bit burned by stuff like Cursed, which Netflix did, which was the same thing. I was like, oh, this looks quite cool. This looks quite interesting. It's like King Arthur, but they're, using the Lady of the Lake sort of character instead. And then that just turned out to be like pretty lame, pretty rubbish. So again, it's like Netflix has been a bit hit and miss with these fantasy shows. So yeah, I think season.
Well, that's just because they keep churning them
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
If they churn them out at that pace, then like some of them are not gonna land.
So yeah, probably season 2 is going to be the one that makes or breaks this show, I'd imagine.
I think I completely agree with you there, because I do agree with you when you say that, like, even though it was successful enough, it wasn't their most successful show. I knew people who'd seen it and raved about it and loved it, but it definitely seems more like one of those shows that's going to develop a more cult following rather than a public mainstream following. But this season could possibly change that. As I said, I'm getting intrigued now. I'm getting pulled in just based off this teaser trailer. So we'll have to wait and see. Quite excited, actually.
It could be like a series of unfortunate events, like a nice kind of 4 seasons, has like a big fan base, but not necessarily everyone has seen it and knows about it.
Which is a shame, because Netflix is a series of unfortunate events is like the most perfect adaptation of any book I've ever seen. Just throwing that in there.
Well,
I love you for that,
again,
Netflix. I love you for that. Please sponsor us.
It's that 50-50 thing, isn't it? They do so many things so well, but then they also cause me a lot of concern with things like the last Airbender adaptation they're doing, and obviously.
Oh, why did you bring that up? I'm still mad about that. Still mad about it. So next up, we got Eternal star Lauren Ridloff addresses inaccessibility issues for the deaf community. So Lauren Ridloff's casting in Eternals makes her the first deaf superhero to be introduced in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Alaka Quox, who is also deaf, has been cast as Echo in the upcoming Hawkeye series on Disney+. While more deaf performers are being cast in major roles across the industry, Lauren Ridloff's recent interview with the New York Times addressed the needs of the deaf community that still need to be met across the entertainment industry, from actors on set to audience members headed to the movie theater. In the interview, Ridloff explained one specific scenario on the set of Eternals, where Makari's starting mark was facing a wall. With her back to the camera, she had no way to know when the director Chloe Zhao had called action. Fortunately, her co-star Angelina Jolie had an ingenious idea, which honestly I'm shocked no one had thought of at that point. So this is what Lauren Ridloff says. At one point, I was sharing my frustration with Angie at a holiday party after a day of shooting, and she immediately made a suggestion. Why don't we use a laser pen that special effects can easily erase? Ridloff described it as an aha wow moment. Whenever I'm looking at a wall, the interpreters would use a laser pen to make the circle on the wall, rolling, 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 and once it went away, that meant action. Ridloff also highlighted the lack of subtitling across the industry, saying Hollywood needs to take the lead on subtitling ads, trailers, and those cute little interviews with clips that celebrities do promoting their movies. She went on to say, we are an afterthought in movie theaters, and that needs to change. You have to use a special closed captioning device to watch subtitling in a theater, and it's a headache because most of the time the devices don't work. Then you have to go back to the front desk and find someone to help, and by the time they'll figure it out, by the time they figure out it's not working, that it's not going to be subtitled at all, the movie's halfway done. So there's some very real concerns that definitely Hollywood has to address. Not just from like the acting side. Like I said, it was a bit ridiculous that like it took Angelina Jolie saying, why don't we use a laser pointer, before everyone thought that could actually help. But also the wider thing of just making movies more accessible to deaf people. It's definitely something Hollywood needs to take the lead on, and maybe hopefully Marvel can be the ones to like pull Hollywood in that direction, with Echo coming on Hawkeye and obviously Ridloff on Eternals. But Dave, what do you think of all this? And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and this one did sort of, I guess, speak to me in a way, because I just feel that I've looked into that area quite a bit when I was doing my master's. One of my journalistic articles I wrote about was sort of hidden disabilities, or those with impairments like being blind or deaf, not having the right representation on screen, but also the opportunities to, play those parts themselves as well. So, I've looked quite a lot into this and spoken to a lot of people, really interesting people who had lots of different takes and, experiences. Yeah, so Lauren Ridloff is somebody that I sort of looked into, and I think even messaged on Twitter, because her messages were open. I was like, oh, hey, can I interview you? But never replied, probably because it's just one of those celebrities that had messages open when they were not as famous, but now have like since become very famous, and then just never turned that option off. So yeah, I think that she's exactly right, and I think that that's why it was always commendable that Marvel did hire her and wanted to have that representation. I think that obviously there has always been the concern that you didn't want the Eternals to kind of just be like, the group of different representations and that kind of stuff. And I think that that's why it's good in this case that you've got actors like Richard Madden, but then you've also got, actors like Lauren Ridloff, so that there's that diversity there, but it's not just literally like, oh, a checkbox of like, this person, that person, like, so they haven't literally like got like a range of disabilities to make it too like obvious. So I think there's good in this circumstance that it's highlighting like those who are deaf. She's done like a fantastic, job so far in terms of highlighting all of this. She was also in the I forgot the name of it now. The Amazon. Well, it was on Amazon. The sort of film about drumming, which was nominated for an Oscar with Riz Ahmed.
Oh, was it The Sound of
Sound of
Metal or something
Metal,
like
yeah.
that?
So she was in
Yeah.
Sound of Metal as well, which she did a fantastic job in. And again, that was so much about embracing the deaf community. So she had to sort of like feature in that film because she is one of those more prominent deaf actresses. You've also had A Quiet Place, which has done some great things with that and incorporated it into the movies as well, which is a fantastic step. So yeah, I think that she's definitely right. And when I've spoken to people about different disabilities, if you want to call it that, or just different ways in which like people work or think, often they will say that even if it's not something physical, you have people who will say, well, if you had somebody in a wheelchair, then you would have to have a ramp to get into the building. And if there's people who have sort of like maybe more like impairments mentally, then they feel that the building isn't accessible to them, to in that sort of metaphor, that they feel that the ramp isn't there. So if you have somebody who is autistic, for example, which is part of the angle I went at with this article, they don't feel that working environments have been set up to those who have autism because, you need to take into account how that, sometimes they can have like a sensory overload or that they might need some like downtime, things like lights, things like noise, information, the way they take that in. And that example that Lauren Ridloff give with the laser pointer is exactly the same kind of thing. Is just the like, how have we never come across this before? How has this only now become a thing? Not to say that every film would always exactly know how to deal with a deaf or blind person on set, but you would have thought that some film at this stage would have had something like that, and they would have said, oh, on this so and so project they did that and that and that, and then the Eternals will go, oh yeah, we'll just mimic that. So the fact that they're having to actually make those strides is just bizarre. And
Yeah, and this is obviously like, even though we keep saying that it's like, how did it take this long to think of this? Like, this isn't to take away from like Angelina Jolie
no,
actually coming up with the idea. Like, it's amazing actually that I think Angelina was the one to come up and go, "Hey guys, laser pointer."
but yeah, people liked it.
But yes,
People don't give Angelina, she's quite a clever businesswoman as well, because when you look at
yeah,
it, she isn't really in that many big films. So, she has made her living by actually becoming Angelina Jolie and becoming this star and this name without having been in like any of like the biggest grossing movies of all time or anything like that. So yeah, she's a very clever lady, and yeah, I think that again it just shows that camaraderie there must have been on set and within the Eternals cast, which is nice as well that they had that kind of bond.
I do love some on-set camaraderie. But yeah, I think you definitely raised some like very very good points there, and I don't know. It's just it's one of those things where it's like, I'm kind of just getting tired of hearing like these examples of how just like Hollywood especially is just not keeping up with the times, because as we are saying, it's a bit ridiculous that like they didn't have a sort of template to go, okay, so we have this deaf actress, so this is what we need to do. The fact that but at the same time, it is great that they are going to be taking these strides, and it will make things easier for deaf actors and actresses in the future. Um, and like I think like Lauren Ridloff and Aleko Cox have got bright futures ahead of them. Because I mean, they're gonna shine in their roles. Let's come on, they're gonna be fantastic. We're gonna absolutely love them. We're gonna demand more of them, and that is what we need. So whilst it is a bit frustrating that it's like we're still fighting these battles in 2021, it is nice that it's like, but at least we seem to be hitting a turning point. It's like the constant thing. People love to make comments about like Marvel's issues with diversity in the past, and there were issues. There were plenty of huge issues with Marvel, right down to like even small things like people feeling shortchanged that Hawkeye never had a hearing aid in, because he does in the comics. He's deaf. He needs it. So maybe that's something that'll come into the Hawkeye series. Maybe they'll finally give us that. But just overall, I think we can agree that in recent years, maybe since slightly before Infinity War and Endgame, when they started doing Black Panther and Captain Marvel, Marvel are trying. They are trying to make diverse works now, cast more diverse people, have more diverse people, not just on screen, but behind as well. Giving people like Chloe Zhao a chance and not pigeonholing her, just being like, you do your thing. We trust you. You do your thing. Just having a film like The Eternals with this massively diverse cast that it's just like, and it's not even like a thing, because like sometimes people do get tired of when you get these diverse casts and just everyone is like talking about the fact that it's diverse, and then people get annoyed that people just keep talking about the diverse fact. But with the Eternals, it just feels right. It just feels good. It feels like this is what we need. I mean, obviously things could change when we see the film, but I imagine they're going to handle everything pretty well, and it's going to show people it's like, look, it doesn't need to be a big thing that you have these actors and actresses from different backgrounds, whether they're black, white, deaf, blind, uh, whether they've like lost limbs or something. They're just the right people for the role, and you love watching them on screen. And it's just, and I really hope Eternals does give me that feeling when I see the film. I don't know if this is making any sense at all. I did have a smoke before we started this podcast, and my PC is shouting at me. But yeah, I just think Eternals is a great step forward for Marvel, and more of the same, please, basically. And I think Shang-Chi as well is helping pave that way. I mean, I think it's like number one in the box office 3 weeks in a row, over 300 million in the box office. I mean, it's a good time to be a Marvel fan, but also I I mean, obviously, I don't know. We're both very white. Our views on this are limited, but I imagine there's a lot of people very, very happy with how successful Shang-Chi has been and how successful Eternals is likely to be. Um, and that's just beautiful, man.
Well,
It's
yeah,
just
and I
beautiful.
think that does come into it though when we say about, ourselves, that we aren't from these backgrounds, or, we're not affected by this personally ourselves. But I think, and, not to say, oh, well, that's why it's fair enough that this has never been a thing before, but it's just kind of like understanding the history that, like, look, this maybe, a small percentage of people who, so especially to bring up the example that she used of cinemas, in which a business could easily say, look, it is hard for us to cater to, I don't know what the exact figure is, but, 2% of people or something like that. When, so that's a big cost to them and that kind of stuff. And, again, not to say it's understandable, but, it's understandable in the sense you can understand that that's a thing, but you don't understand their reason, that they want to go ahead with
It's
that.
understandable from a capitalist
Yeah,
perspective.
it's understandable practically,
Yes.
but not understandable of just being decent human beings, basically.
Yes.
So I think, and that's why there's so many similarities to this as well, which I brought up when I was doing writing, and just whenever these sort of things come up with like gender and sexuality as well, which is also something that's going through a lot of changes in terms of how they're depicted on screen. And we're talking earlier about like Netflix and stuff. They often will try and champion a lot of that stuff, sometimes a bit on the nose, sometimes done tastefully. But I think that's why this comes into it as well, is because it's that aspect of one making it seem natural, and also just we have to make like just the little changes in life that adhere to this. So they've said for the past few years that maybe sign language should be just taught in schools, like basic sign language, that kind of stuff. Or and it's the same with sexuality, gender, all of that kind of stuff. Like me personally, I will try to just refer to certain people as they if I don't know what their pronouns are or what they want to assign themselves, until I know them, or until maybe they've told me, or until I've got like a clear clarification, just because I don't want to make those assumptions. And people might get up in arms about that kind of stuff, but it's like it's a very easy small change to make to your life. Like, how much difference am I making to my life by just sort of like saying they more than he or she? And it's the same thing with that laser pointer, and it's the same thing with the subtitles thing. You can get used to this kind of stuff. A lot of people will say that they put subtitles on Netflix streaming just because they're not personally hard of hearing, but they just physically, like find it easier to read, or they might have, stuff going on in the background, so their partner might be making some noise, or they might be there late at night and they can't have it on loud. Whole host of different reasons. So more people have got used to subtitles from that point of view. But also sometimes it just enhances the experience. People have got used to it with foreign films, and also with like I remember seeing Room, not The Room, the which is the Brie Larson film, which pretty much got her like the gig as Captain Marvel, and I saw that in a subtitled screening, not intended to. It just happened to be the screening that I went to, and me and my friend Craig came away from it, and we're like, that actually like helped us appreciate the film a lot more, because we could focus on some of the dialogue that's been said. Sometimes when you watch something, you're like, oh, what did they say? And these days, a lot of streaming services have the handy thing of like when it rewinds, it'll put the subtitles on just for that bit that you rewind on, just so you can then read like, oh, that's what they're saying. And it's that kind of stuff that does help as well. So I think that if that can be used in a way that also helps all of these people who have hearing impairments, then, that's fantastic. And the whole idea that you've got like stupid little devices that don't work and everything like that, like, why is that even a thing? That's just such a easy fix to me. One, again, it's just whether you have, every other screening is a subtitled screening. You shouldn't have to be making these weird little devices. And it's the same with people who are visually impaired. Why aren't there more audio descriptive services out there, which, again, obviously that might be harder for a general audience to go watch an audio descriptive film, but they should have better technology to allow those people to go and watch it and experience the movie.
But as you said, like, it doesn't have to be every screening. No. Like, they just have to make sure that there's like an equal amount of screenings to give. So rather than have it like just like one day a week, maybe they'll have one showing that's audio descriptive. Just have like a few every day.
Yeah. Like, I remember a comedian pointing out before, it's like, why is sign language television always at like 4:00 in the morning? Like, what, as if like deaf people only like are nocturnal or something?
Maybe they are. There's so much we don't know. I mean, we got 2 deaf superheroes. Maybe they're not. Maybe they actually have powers.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
Well, I think as well, like you brought up Echo, is it the characters?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that after we've had Daredevil and stuff, this is a great step as well, that you're bringing in a character and an actress who has that. So I think, and to especially put it in the Hawkeye series, in which a lot of people could go, oh, well, Jeremy Renner's not deaf. I think that that's a great way of doing this, because I'm not somebody who personally does think that you have to always have somebody of that affliction or of that sexuality, etc., play that role. But I think as long as you're giving opportunities to people in some way or form. For example, if a deaf person wanted to play a character which wasn't, hearing impaired, then, why shouldn't they have that chance? So I think that's a great balance that they've done there as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely also agree, just to the point of like more subtitles and things, because I find subtitles helpful when I'm eating. Or just like, so as you said, it helps you immerse yourself in it a bit more. You can focus a bit more. And I mean, even down to like, if it's like for foreign films, people need to forget their hang-ups on that. Like, one of my favorite movies of all time is City of God. And like, I will always say that that's one of my favorite movies because it is absolutely outstanding. It was all subtitled. I didn't have an issue with it. I loved it. I was still into it. It didn't take anything away from the film. I mean, I'm sure you've seen City of God. You'll agree.
Yeah.
It's spectacular. So yeah, just let everyone enjoy the movies, man. Is that so hard? Really? Do you not like money?
And the last thing
Like,
I'll say with the Internals as well is just I like how they're bringing it into the mythology as well. Is that it makes sense that these people who have been around for 1,000 years would have gone through this stuff. I think what makes this kind of like god storylines that they always tend to do in certain films hard for people to relate to is that they are literally like perfect. So I think in this example, it makes sense. If they've been around for years and years, then the fact, because I think they've said that the reason she's deaf is because of her powers, isn't it? She like breaks the sound barrier or something and like causes that impairment. Like that makes sense. If you've been around for thousands of years or something, you're obviously going to experiment more with your powers or do things that might cause yourself damage. And then in the case of what's like the younger character's name, the one which is like a little girl.
Pixie.
I wanted to say Pixie, and I was just like,
I want to say Pixie, but what if it's not Pixie?
Let's just say it's Pixie. It's not Pixie.
It's the tiny little child.
But again,
okay?
it's that kind
Everyone,
of stuff
the one
of like
child.
they want to remain young, and it's just all that kind of stuff that they would have gone about life and done things in different ways and all of that kind of stuff. So again, if it was the same with sort of sexuality, because I think there's meant to be an LGBT couple in the Eternals and stuff like that as well. All of that kind of makes sense. So yeah, I think that's a great addition as well, is to add it to the mythos and to the story. So Michael Giacchino has shared a preview of the Batman score, and it's as Batman as you can get. After director Matt Reeves breached out of the editing room after 6 months of radio silence to give us a tiny peek into the post-production of the Batman, composer and Academy Award winner Michael Giacchino gave his contribution to the Batman anniversary on Twitter. The Batman will be released exclusively in theaters on March 4th, 2022, and will be streaming on HBO Max 45 days later. And oh my god, I've already discussed when we talked about the HBO fandom, that would be quite a change. DC fandom, I absolutely loved the Batman trailer. I think me and Jake talked about it for a good hour alone or something like that. It was like half that episode was just us talking about the Batman. And when we had that costume reveal, when Michael Giacchino was like announced as the composer, I was like, okay, yeah, this could be good because he's worked with Reeves before. I loved his Planet of the Apes stuff. I'm not exactly like I love everything Giacchino does. I think his Spider-Man and like Jurassic Park World stuff has been like, okay. But at the same time, I absolutely adore his Doctor Strange soundtrack. The stuff he's done for Pixar, The Incredibles, Up, just some of the best soundtracks of all time. He really is like a talented guy. And just as soon as I heard like the first note of the theme, like in that costume reveal, I was like, he gets it. This is perfect, and I love it. It's one of the, when a film comes out, you sort of revisit the soundtrack. This is a weird circumstance in which I'm like, oh, I'm going back to this like teaser of the costume just to listen to that piece of music because it's so damn good. And oh my god, this video he shared on Twitter is so satisfying. Hearing the orchestra, I had chills. I could like break into tears. It was that beautiful. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, what did you think, Tom?
I absolutely adored it. But just to annoy Jake, I hated it. Who even is this Batman? I mean, come on, why doesn't he just like redistribute his wealth and make Gotham better? But no, I mean, I don't genuinely believe that. I've read comics, but I loved it, even though it's the briefest of little teasers. But it just, as you said, it's Batman. It is Batman. He gets it. He's clearly a massive Batman fan because absolutely astounding. I can't wait to hear like the whole thing, and especially in context. I just want to see the whole movie. I might just like buy the soundtrack on vinyl or something.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's, I mean, just like I said, it's the briefest of teases, but
You've got me
it's just
thinking about the
beautiful.
vibe. Like, that's going to sound so nice. Again, I'm not like, I'm a big, music fan, music head, but I'm not one of those of like, I collect films. I can't collect vinyls. I would be bankrupt. But that would sound so nice.
It's just, I think, I mean, this film is shaping up to be something special. I mean, Reeves obviously clearly loves the character. The composer clearly loves the character based on the amazing piece there. Our Pats, I still maintain, was a perfect casting choice. Not one I expected, but when it was announced, I was like, no, you know what? Yes, yes. Give me our Bats.
Yeah, I think he could be
I'm
the
just
Tom Holland of DC kind of thing, of being like, oh, okay, let's, see how it goes, and be like, oh, wow, yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, and they've been clever in getting someone who's quite young and baby faced, so he can be Batman forever.
Mm.
So many more Batmans, 9 more Batman films, 900 seasons of Batman. It's all Batman.
Do you think he'll be Batman forever in the sense he will actually make a film called Batman Forever, in which Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones reprise their roles?
I
As the
think that's
characters?
what the people want. The people need this. I mean, multiverse, man, DC multiverse. They can do whatever they want and bring whoever they want in. Um, which is the glorious thing about cinema now. Well, for all your cape shit, everything is canon.
So the more I see of this film, though, the more I think it is going to be something special. And again, as much as I like hyped and was like excited for the Suicide Squad, that was just again more of a like, oh, this is kind of my jam. This is going to be fun. But like this feels like this is going to be something special kind of thing. And I think when The Dark Knight came out, obviously everyone loved that. The performances were amazing. And for me personally, like, I of course loved it, thought it was great, but I still was like, this is just this version of Batman. This is just this like realistic story and telling of it. So that's why with this, I'm like, yes, this is Batman. This is to me what Batman is about. And I think, like you said, is that they clearly love the character and they're pulling from so many sources. I think that that's what's great about this is that, again, I love like Hans Zimmer and stuff like that, but I never listened to that and went like, oh, this is Batman. I was like, yeah, this is like The Dark Knight. He's setting his own tone. They were creating something original. Whereas this, you listen to it and like just feel the character of Batman. You feel Gotham City. And that's all helped by the fact that it's got elements of like Danny Elfman. It's got elements of Shirley Walker, who did the Batman animated series theme and did a fantastic job, by the way, and has a really nice version of it in Mask of the Phantasm, which is kind of like a more operatic version. But again, it's still like its own thing. It's not like it's just copying those theme songs. And I just think the instrumentation is perfect, kind of like how he did with Doctor Strange, is that he kind of used this like the organ and like the baroque and stuff like that. You were like, oh yeah, that's perfect instrumentation to use here. And it's the same here, in which you like I said earlier, you hear that first note and you go, yes. And what I loved about that, because I think it seems to be recorded in like the London sort of famous recording site they have.
The one.
Yeah. London Symphony Orchestra often do they record Star Wars and everything there. Is that once that orchestra gets going with all of them and it's filling that room, like, I don't know about you, but it very much give me the vibes of like, is this like the end of the movie? Is this like the credits or something like that? Is this like the big triumphant moment? If it isn't, and that's the beginning of the film or something, then wow, what else have we got coming? But yeah, it just such invokes like the character. And I really do think we're in for something special here. I'm so excited because I think that this could be groundbreaking in terms of film. I think already I'm thinking like, wow, is this going to be like one of my top comic book films? Because I'm just so excited and fascinated by everything I've seen so far. The other day I was seeing stuff about Paul Dano, is it, or Dano, who's playing like Riddler. Yeah, and I was like, I think even here we got something really special on our hands, like a kind of Heath Ledger situation in which, and we talked about Jeffrey Wright before as well. It's just, it's just
all
so
coming
perfect.
together quite nicely. And I swear, when I was listening to that clip, halfway through when the big swell came in, I swear I could hear Rob Ayling crying of happiness somewhere. Even though he's miles away, I was just like, Rob, are you okay, man? Are you? Yeah, because he's gonna be happy about this. And like you said, it's just everything is coming up for this film and coming together. and we know we're getting like an expansion on this universe with like the Gotham series and probably more coming out. So, I mean, it's an exciting time, I guess, to be a Batman fan. But when isn't it? It's all Batman. It's all Batman. But yeah, I think I just love it, man. I just love it so much. I'm probably gonna just like play that on a loop to fall asleep tonight. Just have quiet dreams of bats.
That's the thing. It's just like, can you please release like this in some form of like MP3, which we can have on Spotify or something, so we're not just there listening to a
Or
Twitter
they
video.
could release the movie. Just give it just to us, you know, because we've earned it.
You're not like those other ones, are you? You and me, we're connected. You're gonna have to kill some evil people that totally deserve to die. Because it's your destiny. Well, not your most subtle work. You know, if you're looking for a little constructive criticism.
It's time we put an end to this monkey business.
He's coming for me.
No, he's one of the good guys. He's here to protect us all.
Wow, you look like a badass. I never thought a 6-inch inseam would turn me on.
Okay, so we are coming up to our main story, and it's a weird one. This is something that I don't know about you, Dave, but I did not see this coming in the slightest. Something wonderful is happening at Hulu, as Marvel has announced Marvel's Hit Monkey, and they've released a trailer for it, teasing the animated monkey business coming to Hulu in November. So it's hard to describe it as anything other than wild. It stars a Japanese snow macaw with a penchant for murder, teaming up with an assassin's ghost to take revenge on the people that slaughtered his family, all while political drama unfolds in the background. The show is the brainchild of writing duo Josh Gordon and Will Speck for Blades of Glory and Office Christmas Party, who also act as executive producers, and every episode will drop on Hulu on November 17th. Also worth mentioning, Jason Sudeikis, Olivia Munn, and George Takei are in it. So, I mean, I was just like, what? Then I saw the trailer and I was like, what? And then I saw the cast list. I was like, what? It just looks so crazy. And I think it's just interesting to seeing all this. So we had MODOK come from Hulu first. Say what you will about that show. It was good. Nothing to shout home about, but it was all right. But it is interesting to see that they're sticking to like the non-traditional, not non-traditional, but they're going for animation. Like rather than Hulu trying to do any live action products for Marvel, they seem to be sticking to the animation, putting this on top of What If coming from the main Marvel studios. It does look like Marvel are maybe trying to go, all right, guys, DC animation is currently in a bit of a weird place right now. Let's jump in on that. Let's get in on that and prove that we can do animation just as good as DC. So far, I think it's been iffy. Like, because MODOK, as I said, it was okay, but nothing to shout home about. What If, whilst a really good show, some of the animation is maybe needs a little bit of work, a little bit of love, a little bit of tender love and care. But as for the show itself, Hit Monkey, I am excited for it. It looks batshit balls to the wall insane, and I'm here for it. I mean, is that a monkey? It's got a gun. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, as soon as I saw this like on YouTube come up, and I was just like, oh, and it was one of those nice little surprises. And you often get that with animation, in which you just have these like projects that come out of nowhere. And you know, we've talked before, like personally on the show, possibly about how animation is underrated. And I also hate that element of being like, oh, you know, I'd love to see that live action or retold. And it's like, why? You've got the story there in animation. That's fine as it is. And I think that this story and series seems to fit that style. It's the same as if somebody said like, oh, you know, let's get Invincible remade in live action. It's like, why? Why do you need that? You know, like the story and animation works perfectly well for that story. And I think it looks like the same here. And I think that it is an exciting direction for them to go in. Because, as you said, I think it's worth mentioning stuff like MODOK, What If, because while there's been a lot of wins for Netflix, etc., by having this more like anime style with shows like Castlevania and a lot of like, the Blood of Zeus and all of that kind of stuff, then Amazon has got Invincible, as I just mentioned. So I think it's good for Disney and Marvel to get on the board with this kind of more like serious, realistic animation. Well, I say realistic, but more serious, gritty animation. And to me, this also seems very much like, oh, we want to like get in on the kind of Samurai Jack primal vibes, which I think has won quite a few Emmys in the past as well. I saw a few people say that they weren't fans of the animation, and I think some people as well are a bit too harsh when animation isn't just always like fluid, that they kind of go, oh, it's cheap, and it's just like, that isn't necessarily always a bad thing. If you look at things like stop motion or puppeteering, that's obviously like hindered a lot by its limitations, but that's what gives it a charm as well. So I think that in a lot of the shots and a lot of parts of the trailer, I was like, well, in some ways, yeah, it does hinder it and maybe looks a bit cheaper, but in other ways, it kind of gives it this charm and this kind of like comic book or painting kind of aesthetic. And yeah, I'm with you. I thought that it was like batshit crazy enough that I was like, this seems like the kind of thing I'm going to enjoy. It doesn't just look like generic Marvel. And with MODOK, my problem was I couldn't really stick with that because I just felt it was just such a Robot Chicken ripoff that I was just like, I just don't feel that this has kind of got its own voice. And even visually, it looked the same. And, maybe we'll get to it eventually. I do need to catch up on What If, and this is not so much about the animation style, but I haven't really been all that encapsulated by What If either. And I think a lot of my problems with it is just that it's just not original because so much of it is based off the movies. And so here I'm like, oh yay, we've got new characters, new voice actors, a new style of animation, etc. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. As you said, it sounds batshit crazy. It sounds like my jam, especially the element of like, he teams up with an assassin's ghost. I just love that. I also just love some of the humor and the dialogue we had here, in which like he puts on the suit and he's just like, yeah, I'm kind of turned on right now, or something like that. He's just like, this looks kind of good and all this kind of stuff. So it just seems like a very like out there comedy, but it's not. It seems like it's done well. It seems like it's clever writing rather than being too on the nose or too much like it's like kind of trying to copy other stuff. So yeah, I really like the look of this, and I'm excited. And thankfully, it's like only around the corner.
It is very much around the corner, November 17th. So definitely watching out for that. And yeah, it is an interesting point you make, actually, when people do sort of complain about, the animation looks a bit sloppy or a bit cheap. Because I hear about shows all the time. So many great animated shows I've watched that other people have said, oh, I was put off by the animation because I thought it looked cheap. But it's like, okay, so I'm heavily into Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra and all the associated books and comics. Every Tuesday, I listen to Janet Varney and Dante Bosco's Braving the Elements podcast, where they have guests from the Avatar verse on the show to like have interviews or just like review the episodes. Consequently, I've heard a lot of Brian and Mike's like views on like how they describe what animation is like and what it takes and what you have to do. People do not understand how difficult it is and how expensive it can actually be. I think lots of people think it's just, you're just drawing things, you put it on a computer, and it's not. There is so much work involved. And there's actually an old thing of just like, sometimes it's better to go for the cheaper look because you can actually do more with it in animation. Because like some of like there have been some animation things where I've like, okay, She-Ra. Initially, I was a bit put off by the art style of it. Watching the first episode, I was like, not sure I am a fan of like the art style and animation. Some of it looks a bit too simple, a bit too just like whatever. But like going through the rest of the series, like what they were able to do with it, it was just like I got hooked and I loved it so much. That's the same like even in Avatar: The Last Airbender, like Michael DiMartino will say himself that there are some times he watches back on the show and he's just like doesn't like how that's been animated. He thinks like there's a couple of even animation errors. There's one frame in one episode where Toph has 6 fingers. That just got overlooked completely. It's a hard medium to get right, and that's why when the good animated shows happen, like they become like huge global sensations. It's because like animation is an art form. And like you have to think as well from a direct, like these animated shows have directors. Imagine how difficult it must be to direct an animated show. If you're doing live action, you've got everyone there, you're on set, you're working with people. With an animation, it's a lot more difficult. So I think don't immediately knock something just because you're like, I'm not a fan of how it looks or it looks a bit cheap, because sometimes it will take you completely by surprise and you will absolutely love it. As for the larger conversation of like Marvel animation, as I said, like same as you, MODOK, I liked it well enough. It made me laugh on occasions, but yeah, it was basically a Robot Chicken knockoff. And it didn't do enough to like grab me. Like if they announced a new season, I'd probably be like, I might give it a miss, to be honest. What if I've probably been loving it more than you, but like not every episode I've loved. And like I said, I do have some issues with it. So, but Marvel, whilst they have dabbled in animation before, obviously with like the old series is like the X-Men, Spider-Man, and they had like some of those animated films, like the Doctor Strange animated film or Hulk versus whoever they decided to pick that day. They have always been like noticeably not as good as like the DC stuff, like Justice League Unlimited or Batman the Animated Series or any of the animated films, whether it's Justice League War, Justice League Doom. They've always been head and shoulders above Marvel. So if Marvel are trying to basically show like, look, we can do animated stuff just as good as DC, even if I'm sure that's not the only reason they're doing this, obviously, but I do feel like maybe they need to step it up a notch. Obviously, I'll judge What If as a whole when it all comes out, because like I've seen it happen with shows before where like there's been some episodes I've been like on, but then when you see them in the context of the whole season, it's like, actually, no, love it now. Happens all the time with Doctor Who. So yeah, I'm excited for the future of Marvel animation, but also just cautious about it, because I think they need to pick some cleverer shows to do it. I think Hitmonkey is maybe like the right kind of idea, but again, is that maybe more Hulu than Marvel Studios there, like with decision making? So
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's what works well, though, is that the fact that, and that's what sort of puts me off What If in a way, is that just like it seems very kind of manufactured in like, oh yeah, it's the MCU, and I think that a part of animation is that it needs to be a lot more like raw and like from a creative place in its own thing. And I think similar to how people would be like, oh, the CW shows and that kind of stuff and the DC animated universe, is that I think it's harder for an animated universe to be shared with like a live action one. And I think because you can set apart your worlds more, you were mentioning again Avatar, and I think the creators there have said that they created, they're creating this kind of like Avatar universe or whatever for more stories, and that kind of makes sense because you know the world of Avatar by seeing the style of the animation. I've said the same thing a lot on the Mandalorians with Star Wars. I feel to me that like the animation of the Clone Wars and Bad Batch is kind of like ingrained in that storytelling. Obviously with things like Visions that have just come out, like that's a fantastic exploration of the medium as well, and I love that. I don't want to get rid of that, but it just you just want to carry on that style as well, to kind of like instantly be like, oh yeah, this, I'm comfortable in this world, I know what I'm getting. And I think that that's not something that you get with live action. With animation, you kind of the animation could tell the story. It's kind of again like stop motion and puppetry it's the charm and the details that you can see within the fact that it was made by somebody's hands and somebody drew that or somebody did it on a computer and added those little details in. Whereas when you watch something live action, you could be watching it being like, oh, I don't like the way that looked because maybe the day they filmed it was a bit too bright out or it was a bit too dark or somebody's hair got messed up or just they're not a very good actor or, their costume is rubbish, all that kind of stuff. Whereas none of that is a concern in animation. It's all within their hands. So yeah, and I think that that's why animation works so well, is that it kind of goes back to those days of storybook telling, the fact that you've just got a picture in a book and your imagination can do the rest. So I hate that kind of like, oh, it's for kids and all that kind of stuff, because again, adult animation has really proven itself with things like Samurai Jack. You were mentioning there as well the limitations that they had in Avatar, and that can often be, a bonus because, look at anime, look at things like Dragon Ball Z. If that was like live action of somebody like shooting laser beam and you were seeing every detail, was having that freeze frame of somebody being like, oh, it makes it like more dynamic in a way of like, oh, it's like a comic book panel or something like that.
Could you imagine if they did a live action Dragon Ball?
Oh,
I
know.
That would be ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be so ridiculous.
So, I think that some stuff just works for animation. And in the example of Avatar, I think that works to their benefit as well because it's bending. It's like, throwing a rock and having water. That kind of like, I don't know, kind of clunkiness in a way almost works. Like in metal bending, for example, in Korra, the way that they have to zip around and like, while it might not be every single frame that they just zip from one place to another, works with the idea that how metal bending works and the magneticness and stuff. Whereas I don't think in live action that would work as well. Again, let's not like give ourselves nightmares about the live action one that we have seen. But there have been talks that, we talked earlier about Netflix doing a Avatar adaptation, and there might be more to come in the future. But I'm like, I don't think that that story lends itself to, to live action. And I think it's the same with something like this. If I saw like an actual not physical monkey, but like a CGI monkey or something, it just wouldn't, have the same effect, I don't think. So, yeah, I'm excited for this. I think that it looks really good. I think that, while maybe the human sort of animation designs might not look as well, Hitmonkey himself, like, really suits the style and looks really great. And, I'm loving, like, the colors and everything that they've got here. As you said, the voice cast is fantastic. I'm a big fan of Olivia Munn, big fan of Jason Sudeikis. He sounds like he's doing a great job. You got Fred Tatasciore as Hitmonkey. Interestingly, on IMDb, it only shows like one episode each for all of these people. So I don't know if this is kind of like a pilot or whether they haven't announced the full season of how many episodes they're going to be yet. But I'm excited for something new, and I think that's important for Marvel to like say, this is the Marvel animation world, and it can just be its own thing. It can be the kind of like Hitmonkey kind of random projects. You could have Howard the Duck in the future. You could have more projects like that.
God, we're gonna get Howard the Duck. But there's also something to be said for like if Marvel can use animated projects to get in more people. I'm gonna call out my old housemate Owen here, who I do love to bits, but like famously, it's been hard for me to get him into cape shit. And recently as well, he's generally only watching. He only kind of likes to watch animated shows now. Not always. He does watch live action stuff, but at the moment, like he's getting deep into animation. So if I was to show him like What If, for example, is like, there's a Marvel animated show. It's cape shit because he loved Invincible, right? He loved Invincible when I got him to watch that, and it was off the back of the cast list and the fact it was animated, and he loved it. But if I showed him What If, even though it's animated, it's like that's not going to do anything for him because like so much of it relies on you knowing the MCU. If I was to show him Hitmonkey, I'd bet so much money he'd be into that and he'd want to watch it. And there's plenty of people like that. So if Marvel do want to like try and grab the last few people who aren't watching MCU products, this could be the way to do it. And because of the multiverse, you can get away with just having solely animated shows. So I'm keen to see more of it, really.
Yeah. It's worth pointing out as well, I'm not sure if they've announced like officially whether it's coming to the UK on the same date that they've announced for Hulu. But obviously in the UK we have Star, which they've made a thing, which is a great way for us to be able to get these Hulu shows. So I think that Star will probably be the way in which we get this Hitmonkey show. Whether that means we'll get it the same date or not, I don't know. It would be nice if we did. Maybe if it's a few weeks out, it's not the end of the world. But I think also as UK consumers, we can be more rest assured now that we know we got something like Star, whereas in the past they had things that were dropping on Hulu, which us in the UK and Europe, etc., were like, oh, we can't watch this, whereas now we can. And it fits Star. It fits that kind of, if it was there on Disney, on the Disney section, you'd be like, oh, that doesn't quite make sense. But it fits the Star brand.
Yeah, exactly. I do like Star. I was so happy when that came out, to be honest. So, yeah. Do you have
It gives you The
anything?
Walking Dead. It gives you the chance to rewatch that and be
Yeah,
disappointed.
exactly. Which is exactly what happened to me. I got like a season and a half in, and I was like, "Why am I doing this? Let's watch 30 Rock." So now I'm watching 30 Rock on Amazon Prime. Sponsor us. Anyway, do you have anything else to add on Hit Monkey?
No, like I said, just like we said, if there's any from all the recommendations we give there, if you are looking for a chance to watch some cool animations, then they are just such a great list of stuff that you can go check out. Which
Yeah.
is like action shows, comic book stuff,
Yeah.
comedies, so much out there.
I highly recommend Scissor 7 on Netflix. Season 3 is dropping soon. Honestly, incredible show. Incredible show. I highly recommend. But yes, so Hitmonkey dropping on Hulu on November 17th and maybe here then. Who knows? We'll find out. But that's it for our main story. So I guess now it's time to go into the pull list.
Well, after X-Men hit at the box office, all the studios started buying up every comic property they could get their dirty little hands on.
Okay, everyone. So if you're not sick of my voice yet, it's time for the pull list. And I was a fan of Jake's pull list last week. The lack of Grant Morrison's Superman and the Authority was outrageous. But we move on. So this week, I've got some good picks for you. Got some very decent picks for you. Let's start with Marvel. So The Last Annihilation has kicked off. And in fact, it's actually coming to the end now this week in Guardians of the Galaxy issue 18. The Last Annihilation has been so badass. It's basically Dormammu is taking over the universe, and it's bad, guys. It's getting really quite bad. But Al Ewing has been delivering as he always does because he is just one of the best comic book writers right now. So definitely check this out. Check out the entire event. It washes the taste of Annihilation Scourge out of your mouth, and it does feel like the Annihilation days of old again. So definitely check that out. Staying with Marvel, it's the start of It's the start of a thing that I'm quite sad about. It's the death of Doctor Strange, issue 1. Marvel, of course, famous for killing off characters and giving them runs that are called the death of this character because, like, why have any secrets there? But now it's Doctor Strange's turn, and it's really sad, guys, because I love Doctor Strange, but this is probably why I'm gonna love this series. It'll because these series always tends to give like the characters like it gives you the full sense of like their history, and like usually they do leave you feeling a bit fulfilled. And I mean, I feel like Doctor Strange has been overdue a death as well. We can get a new Sorcerer Supreme, and that is just going to open up a whole load of new things. So definitely pick that up because it's going to lead to some pretty interesting stories. Jumping on over then to DC, we've got issue 4 of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So in this issue, Supergirl is setting her sights on the Brigands, a group of dastardly nomads hell-bent on slaughtering all they come across. This has been a very, very good series from Tom King, as per usual. There you go, Jake. I gave you some Tom King. I've been loving it. The art is fantastic. The story has been great. I love me some Supergirl, so definitely pick that up. Sticking with DC then, we're heading underwater for Aquaman The Becoming, issue 1, and Aqualad, Jackson Hyde, is taking the lead in this one. So things are going well for him until they aren't, and now he has to figure out his place in the world and maybe try and graduate from sidekick to Aquaman, be his own guy. I love Jackson Hyde. This comes from writer Brandon Thomas. I think this is going to be a fun little series. I love Aqualad, so always happy to see more of him. Because he's great representation, people. Great representation. Going for our non-Marvel, non-DC pick. I decided to go to Boom Studios. I know, shocking. And it's for this week's issue of Eat the Rich, and that's issue 2. So I've only just kind of taken notice of this series. I mean, obviously it's only on issue 2, but I mean, it's pretty good, guys. It's pretty good. It's from Sarah Gailey, Pius Beck, and Roman Titov. I would definitely, I check it out. Please check it out. I mean, if the title "Eat the Rich" doesn't grab you, I guarantee you the first issue will definitely hook you in. And I'm excited for the second issue now, and just for the rest of the series in general, and just excited for Boom Studios in general. They're really pumping it out, and maybe if I praise them enough when my comic is finally done, maybe they'll release it for me. I don't know. So just going over all that list again. From Marvel, we've got Guardians of the Galaxy issue 18 and the last tie-in to Last Annihilation. The Death of Doctor Strange, issue 1. Don't leave me, Stephen! Over at DC, we've got Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, issue 4 from the wonderful Tom King. And we've got Aquaman, The Becoming, issue 1, Jackson Hyde taking place. And then, of course, from Boom Studios, Eat the Rich, issue 2. This is going to be the new series I'm harping on about now that The Many Deaths of Layla Starr has finished. And for my classic pull this week, seeing as we were talking about the Batman earlier, and because I was talking about it earlier on Facebook, I'm going to recommend Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth. And this is not just because of the lack of Grant Morrison last week, although it kind of has something to do with it, but also it's just one of the most important Batman comics of all time. It was one of the most experimental works of its time. It's one of those books that even if you haven't read it, you've probably heard of it. So now this is your excuse to go and read it because the comic book shogun demanded that you do. Uh, so yeah, there we go. Dave, anything pick up your interest there? Your nose twitching at some possibilities of future solicits?
Well, in terms of going back to like Marvel comics, because that was mainly the ones I saw went through when I was collecting comics. Doctor Strange has been one which I thought like, if I was to go back, Doctor Strange would be it, because I have, where I've seen a lot of the covers and stuff like that. I'm like, that looks quite cool. He's going into space. His costume's quite cool at the moment. So yeah, of course, then when I'm thinking that he's going to die. But yeah, that now you mention it, it does kind of make sense that I'm like, you've had Ironheart and Miles Morales and everything like that. But yeah, we haven't really had sort of like a Strange or Sorcerer Supreme exchange, which would be interesting. So I think the comics always kind of need that. But yeah, that's either going to like spur me on to kind of like go back and see some of the other runs that I wanted to check out. Also with like Marvel stuff, I wanted to check out Matt Fraction's run on Hawkeye just after the trailer for that, where like there was so many like Easter eggs and nods that were in that series. Usually, obviously, I'm more like, I'll let the the series tell the story for me. But because it seems kind of like half and half, loosely based on that series, and I kind of always been drawn to the Hawkeye character, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to check that out. So hopefully, I'm gonna look to pick that up in the future once I'm got more time, possibly throughout Christmas. Why not? Hawkeye has made itself a Christmas show. Maybe I'll have a Hawkeye Christmas and be reading that throughout the holidays.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'm definitely going to pick up that Hawkeye series again because I did love Matt Fraction's run. I feel like I'm going to have to do it in preparation. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We appreciate people coming on board every week, listening to us speculate, discuss, and geek out. But if you want to continue the conversation with us, Dave, where can they find you?
You can catch me over on Twitter at David Osger, which is probably the best place to find me at the moment, in which I'm probably the most active, which isn't very much at all on there. But my letterbox is kind of like dying at the moment when I'm not got time to watch many films. So if you do follow me on Letterboxd, I should be back up and running, seeing cinemas, etc. I do feel like part of my soul is dying, in which I haven't been to a cinema in like about 2-3 weeks. I'm like, what's happening? What's...
Hey Dave, I've been 3 times in the past 2 weeks.
Jealous. So
no, wait, 4.
You've got an Odeon in Swansea as well, so you can make advantage of that limitless. But yeah, I'm missing the cinema. Hopefully going to return soon, catch up on some stuff that needs watching. Same with like a lot of the films that I've sort of moved over from my old house, and I'm like, man, I need to rewatch that. So, and then a lot of series to catch up on. So yeah, hopefully I'll be posting about all of that kind of stuff. But stay tuned to my Twitter, because then hopefully when I've got a lot of my projects back up and running over on Fresh Take Hub, etc., then you can see all about it there.
Fantastic. I kind of agree that when Dave does post on Twitter, it's fire.
You can just, I'm just there like making people want to buy Lego minifigures when Marvel destroyed me by going, "Oh, we're releasing an MCU minifigure range." I'm like, "Oh, my wallet."
I recently
No.
got into watching Lego Masters Australia, so like, yeah, I feel your pain, man. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Comic Book Shogun, and that's about it, really. I'd say my Letterboxd and Instagram, but I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm like so on Twitter now. I'm tweeting all the time. Are you all happy now? So yeah, find me there, and you can find Jake on Twitter at Sweaty Jake, and also on Letterboxd at Jake Hart. Let him know you missed him. Let him know you love him, and also you can find and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Capes Cowles Mask. And be sure to send us all your tweets, all your woes, all your fears for the upcoming Venom film. And who knows, you might even get a shout out on this podcast. And whether you use Anchor, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, subscribe and follow us on there. And if you're on Apple, leave us a rating and a review, as it all helps us to go up in the rankings. The best thing you can do is recommend and show us all to your geeky friends and expand the family of capes, cowls, and masks. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all next week. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a beautiful time.